Hi, my name is Karen Turner, and along with my colleague and friend Orlando Haynes, we are the co creators of the Career Accelerator Planner. After sharing this idea with career coaches, recruiters, resume gurus, we know that there is nothing like this in the marketplace today. The Career Accelerator Planner is the only place you need to document your performance, your contributions, and your value. That's right, no more rifling through old sticky notes, trying to find emails you may have written to yourself, shuffling through old notebooks, trying to find the mentions of the projects or initiatives you were involved in that you thought you would never forget. And Orlando and I are not just handing you an empty notebook. Between us, we have over 40 years of experience in corporate America, over half of those in leadership, including senior executive roles. So we have curated the questions and the prompts that we know you need to document to keep that vital information top of mind so that you're prepared for your promotion conversations, discussions about compensation, or if you're considering changing careers or organizations. The Career Accelerator Planner is here, and we couldn't be more excited to introduce you to this invaluable resource. Track your performance, document your contributions, know your worth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Leadership Untitled with Karen Turner. That is me on this podcast, Leadership Untitled with Karen Turner. I talk about leadership development. I talk about career strategies. I talk about operations excellence, basically all things related to how you can show up in your area of leadership, in your expertise, in your field at your highest level. Today, we're going to dive into a somewhat controversial topic. We're going to be talking about, as you saw from the title, corporate gaslighting. Now, why do I say that it's controversial? Partially because those who perpetrate this manipulation, let me turn off my, hold on, everyone. I have Facebook going here because we're live streaming to LinkedIn, to Facebook, and to YouTube. So, welcome, welcome. Join in the conversation. Leave your comments if you are watching live. If you are listening to this anywhere that you can listen to podcasts, I invite you and welcome you in to join the visual experience. It's where all the fun happens. All right. So, the reason why I say that corporate gaslighting is somewhat of a controversial topic is because those who perpetuate the manipulation, the gaslighting, don't want us to talk about it. Or if we do, there's certainly that impression that perhaps by speaking about it, by putting a name to it, by putting words to it, that we are somehow weak. We can't handle corporate. This is just how life is. And this conversation is first to say, no, that is absolutely not the case. We are going to take back our voices. I want to share with you my strategy, number one strategy for not only regaining your voice, but resetting your mind, shifting your mindset so that you remember how incredibly powerful you are. But the first thing is, shedding light on the problem and not being afraid or feeling ashamed to discuss it. Because unfortunately, way too many professionals, especially women of color, experience this phenomenon, this bullying, this toxic behavior on a regular basis. So we're going to jump into it. For those of you who know, you know that earlier this year I began my educational journey to complete my doctorate, which hopefully will be my terminal degree, my last degree that I obtain. And one of the resources that I had to become familiar as part of my orientation was getting familiar with Merriam Webster's dictionary. Now, I love a good dictionary. I, and probably many of you, either default to using the word processing document or software for spelling, grammar, synonyms, thesaurus, there you go, thesaurus as well, or just using Google and typing in whatever it is that you need to find. So I went to the website and I discovered that they have some fun features that have pulled me back every now and again. So I'm going to pull it up for you. I'm looking off to the side where my monitor is. So you'll see here one of, well, the two things that I enjoy about the website are right here. Top lookups right now. This this has gotten my attention probably way too much, but it's so interesting to know what the world is searching for and the themes that it is looking for. And so, as you can see here, this is what people are looking for right now. I think it refreshes every 30 seconds. And then also, the word of the day is also fun for me too. So, I come here not as frequently as when I first began school, but um, when I first started school, I went to, so I'm going to pull up another one here so it'll be ready for me when I'm ready to show it. When I first started and I was going more frequently to the website, on more than one occasion, either the first word or the second word that was being searched was gaslighting. So, which I found incredibly interesting because it's a buzzword. And clearly, we are all very interested in what the definition is. And unfortunately, tying this back to why this can be a controversial topic, as words become more readily used, they do fall into that buzz category and sometimes can become discounted. We could have a whole conversation on the word woke and how that has been, taken up into society and has been used across the board and now is almost considered a dirty word, for anyone who says it. So, gaslighting is almost coming into that category where because it's being used so often that it is becoming discounted and or not a real experience, not a real phenomenon. So let's look at the definition because it is real. So let's be clear, let's set the stage. Gaslighting is very real. And as we look at the definition, if it makes you feel better, if you're someone who happens to be rolling your eyes, although if you're listening to this podcast, you should know that this falls into line with what I talk about. And so if you happen to be that person who's just like gaslighting, overused, not real, let's call it toxic environment. Let's call it bullying. Let's call it minimizing. There are a lot of words that can be used in its place. But let's first look at the definition. Let's jump into it. For those of you who are listening, I will read it. Psychological manipulation of a person, usually over an extended period of time, that causes the victim to question the validity of their own thoughts, perception of reality, or memories, and typically leads to confusion, loss of confidence and self esteem, uncertainty of one's emotional or mental stability, and a dependency on the perpetrator. Those are all very powerful words. Those are very powerful concepts. Those are incredibly powerful thoughts. And anyone who has experienced this manipulation can probably raise their hand to feeling a lot of what I just read and what that definition is. So we've read the definition. Let's talk about how it manifests itself in how you are feeling. And as I shared, minimized, demoralized, unheard, unseen, disrespected, and eventually, as the definition says, you may begin to feel, you may already be feeling, you may wonder if they, and by they, I mean the person who you report to, your colleagues, even people who report to you, because manipulation doesn't know titles. It can be anyone in your sphere that is working to break you down. So you may begin to wonder, you may begin to feel and question if they are right about whatever it is that you're experiencing. I, over my 20-year corporate career, I loved what I did. And I still love what I do in terms of my expertise. For those of you who don't know, for the first part of my career, I worked definitely in the technology area for a stock photography agency downtown Toronto, Ontario, Canada. It was an incredible first job straight out of my bachelor's degree. Then, after 5 or 6 years, I was ready to continue my education. And that's when my husband and I moved to the US, where I completed my master's in public health and obtained my registered dietitian certification and went straight into leadership. And that was almost 15 years ago that I ended, that I finished school and went straight into a leadership role. And since then, I've been in either healthcare, hospitals, health and wellness on the operations side. And I love it. I love operation leadership. I love working with others. I love helping to build teams, to create cultures that are inclusive, that are diverse, where I focus on belonging. That is part of who I am and how I bring myself to my role. I do bring a lot of myself into my job. And I've talked about that as leaders. So many of us, it's part of the job description that's unwritten, that you are bringing a lot of who you are and opening yourself up in order to be an effective leader, not just in the tasks that you do, but in how you guide and direct others. It requires more of you. You're not just coming in, clocking out. You're bringing a lot of yourself to work every single day. So there's a lot about my corporate career that I miss. And for those who don't know, about 7 months ago, my position was eliminated. And since then, I have spent time, it's been almost 7 months. I've spent a lot of that time focused on processing the 20 years that I've spent in corporate, especially the last 15 years in leadership. I've spent time processing and detoxing what my experience was. I had coffee with a dear friend and colleague yesterday, and she shared with me that she was listening to or reading. She was either listening to a book or reading a book or listening to a podcast. There you go. And it was talking about the phrase that people like to use, like, I have no regrets. I would never go back and change anything. And there's certainly space for that, but she shared with me, just are you really growing if you never look back and say, there's things that I would have done differently? Even if something went incredible, I think as we grow and as we change, we can look back and that it doesn't devalue the experience. It doesn't take anything away from who you were and what you did, but there is value in turning and back and saying, I would have maybe done this differently, or I can see the way in which I grew and I could see the path that I took that led here, but I might have gone a different way to get a different result. So, how are you growing? And that's what this processing and detoxing time has been, because let me tell you, gaslighting and feeling minimized is real, especially as a woman of color, a Black woman in leadership. And talk about the intersection of having a position with authority, but not having the authority of feeling entirely comfortable, feeling that you have the same opportunities as others, seeing others leapfrog you when perhaps you have been promised future roles, increased compensation. That intersection of leadership as a person of color is one that is that could fill a whole other podcast episode. And so those are the types of things that I've been thinking about. And that I also didn't understand the degree to which I experienced manipulation and gaslighting until I had an opportunity to step back and step out of the space. And I recognize that in so many of those instances, instead of pulling back and saying, "What's happening?" I instead said, "I'm going to dig deeper and grind harder, hustle harder, push more." And I recognize now that there's no amount of grinding, there's no amount of hustling that I could have done to change those situations because they were out of my control. And instead, I was being manipulated, gaslit to believe that somehow it was my issue. And if it was just my problem alone, that would be sad, but at least I would say, "You know what? I've learned my lesson, I can move on." But here's what I know, I am not alone. I hear from colleagues still. I have clients who share with me these stories. I listen to other podcasts, I read other stories. I know that I'm not alone, and that's incredibly sad to know. What's even sadder is that the experiences are eerily the same. When I have these conversations, when people reach out who are just listening to the podcast and are just like, I don't feel comfortable publicly commenting, which I understand also because the corporate world can be one that takes action against you quickly. And many people are not in a position to freely speak and share their experience. So if that's you, please feel free to message me. We can have those conversations. I will encourage you, provide whatever resources I can. Feel free to message me. Again, my email, Karen, you can see Karen there, Kareen at leadershipuntitled.com. But what I saw and what I hear is that those experiences are eerily the same. And what I hear is, I'm doing you a favor by giving you this job, and you should be extremely grateful that you have this position, that I saw something in you, and you're not deserving to be here, but I, in my greatness, have decided that you will have this job, and I expect in return this level of servitude from you. You're also not qualified for anything else. So if I decide to give you anything else, it's out of my goodness, not out of anything that you have earned. Those are generally the stories that I hear and how it is framed. Very few people will frame it specifically and say those words specifically because thankfully there are labor laws that protect you from some of that language. And so instead, it is heavily implied. It is excluding you from some meetings. It is having conversations that don't include you, even though they're about your areas. It is about silencing you in meetings, things that you can't quite put your finger on, but over time, they build up to make you feel and leave you feeling without even realizing what's happening, because it does happen over time, as the definition said, that leave you feeling that perhaps I'm the problem and not the organization. The other complicated part of that is that as people of color, women of color, we've also been conditioned, probably if you're of a certain age like myself, where you have to work twice as hard. We raise your hand. I can't see you, but still raise your hand if you have heard that, if you've been told that, if that's what you grew up listening to, whether it was from parents, family members, teachers, but people who were generally well intentioned, telling you that you have to work twice as hard. So we have already been conditioned that there is something about us that is lacking, that we need to work twice as hard just to get what the next person, the next white person or male, will automatically achieve just for who they are. And when you have that combination of someone already believing that they are less than and that they need to work harder than to prove that they belong, and you have someone who has toxic, manipulating, gaslighting behavior, it is an incredibly dangerous combination. And what it ends up with over time is that feeling of, I might be the problem, not the organization. And you may find yourself spinning into that frenzy, that performance frenzy, attempting to reach this ever moving bar that you can never meet. Or when you think you meet it, it's moved and it's never acknowledged that the bar has moved. And so you're the problem. It's heavily implied. You're the problem. You begin to doubt your skill. You begin to doubt your capabilities. You begin to doubt your experience, your intelligence. And so either you're broken, which is okay, and there's nothing to feel ashamed about saying, I feel broken, or you're fighting. And every day you go in knowing what you're up against, but you choose to fight to overcome. But the result of either of those is that you are exhausted. You are fatigued. I hear it so much. How are you doing? I'm tired. I'm just tired. I just want to be able to go in, do my job to the best of my ability and not be hindered by the arrows that are coming, that either we let hit us because we're just tired, or we have our shield up, which is tiring, always holding up a shield. You're not excited to go to work. You're frustrated, you're angry, and you're doubting yourself. Those are all the results of a toxic environment, an environment where you are being gaslit. I do wish it was absolutely illegal. And as I shared, there's definitely behaviors that when you see them and you're documenting and being sure that you are communicating with your HR department so that it is documented, that there is a record of your concerns, of your grievances. I also highly recommend that you connect outside with a community, with a safe space, with a safe person, because you need all of the support and resources that you can to help bolster you, to help hold you up. The other part is you might work for an incredible organization, because this is the other complicated part of it. None of this is easy, right? You might work for an organization that is incredible, and other people, other colleagues are experiencing something so much different than what you are. And you look around and you say, well, yeah, I mean, this is a great place to work. You know, the employee engagement scores are incredible, even within your team, to the person who you report to. But if it's not your experience, it doesn't mean that your experience isn't valid. It doesn't mean that what you're experiencing isn't true, isn't happening, just because others aren't feeling the same way. And others might be feeling the same way, but it's not impacting them from a financial perspective, a compensation perspective, from a performance perspective, promotion perspective. Again, while the situations might be eerily the same as I shared, each of us experiences it in a unique way. You may have a toxic leader and others may not in the organization. Or it just may be that you are experiencing it. But again, it doesn't invalidate what is happening to you. And it doesn't mean that your voice has to be quieted or silenced. So what do? I've already shared a couple of things. Be sure that you're documenting just on the real. Keep a record, okay? Be sure that you are documenting. Be sure that you are leaving a paper trail because eventually the gaslighting, these manipulative behaviors pile up and that person who believes that you depend on them, as we saw in that definition, who believes that you depend on them or the organization, they start to get comfortable, they start to get arrogant, and they show themselves. Okay, if you still happen to be there when that happens, then you will be prepared to take action. So be sure that you are taking those concrete steps. That also is a whole other episode, probably more of a private conversation. So, as I said, be sure that you have a community. Be sure that you are surrounding yourself with people who can bolster you, but who can also guide you on how to take action when it's necessary. For the purposes of this podcast, where I would start first is rebuilding your mindset. As we read in that gaslighting definition, the purpose of that behavior is to decrease your self esteem, decrease your confidence, silence your voice, make you feel like you are dependent, that you need to be grateful for whatever it is that you have, and that you have not earned the job, that you don't have the skills. So, we need to rebuild your mindset, especially if you've been in that situation for a continued time period. And it's going to require some work, but here is where we're going to begin. Because I want you, the only way to combat that feeling is with facts. And the only way to regain your voice is with facts. So I want you to first write down every single thing that you are doing. If you have a to-do list, incredible. I want you to go back, start at January 1st, 2022, and just read through your notebook on the things that you have done, not just your to-do list, but the notes that you have written. I want you to read it because as you read it, you will recognize that, nope, you'll begin to remember how much value you bring to the organization where you work. You will begin to remember, you'll work that muscle memory about how intelligent you are. You'll begin to recognize that if I wasn't here in this role doing what I'm doing, maybe someone else might come in, but they're not going to do it to the level of excellence that I did it. And without me here, these are the things that would have fallen by the wayside. If for some reason you don't have a to-do list or somewhere where you're tracking these things, please start. That is your first step. So either review the things that you've already done in your notebook, your to-do list, start a to-do list so that you have this, because what you need to do is combat manipulation and gaslighting with facts. You need to regain your voice. After you've taken the opportunity to write everything down, so beginning today, write every single thing down that you do. I don't need you to discriminate against anything. I want you to write everything down. When you talk to a colleague, when you spend time with a team member, because that's where you realize the value and what makes you unique at what you do. One of the things as I'm sitting here talking to you, and as I said, write down everything that you do. I remember I would spend the first 40, 45 minutes of my day when I worked in healthcare, rounding in every single department, walking to other buildings, talking with my team members. It didn't take a lot of time for each team member, but I had a lot of people reporting to me across different areas, but I would spend that time. And that is something that is part of how I build relationships and something that as a leader I was known for. I've never written that down anywhere. but it is certainly how I bring value. No one wants to have a department that churns and burns through team members. So, your ability to build relationships, to have conversations, to be able to work with other colleagues, that is part of your value, but you won't know it if you don't write it down. So, listen to my words, not necessarily what I do. Write every single thing down. Then I want you to identify the initiatives, the projects, the ideas that you had that you're working on from your to-do list. So what are all of your to-dos working towards? What initiatives, what projects, what greater goal are each of your to-do items linked to? And as I started this episode with the Career Accelerator Planner promo, this is one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this planner. Whenever I put something out in the world, it's because it has incredibly deep meaning to me because of the work that I do, because of how I've listened to colleagues, my personal experience, my clients' experiences. That's where that's why I'm so passionate about it, because it is your opportunity to shift your mindset and begin building the habit of quantifying your value, your capabilities. Yes, definitely logging everything that you do, tracking what you do can lead to promotions, can lead to more money. And we're all here for that, but I don't want to forget the power of quantifying value. Because when you are in the midst of a toxic environment, when you are in the midst of dealing with a leader who doesn't recognize your value, who doesn't recognize not your value, your contributions, because they've minimized your value, this building this habit through the use of the planner is so key, because if you don't believe in your value, then it doesn't matter what you write in the book, because you'll never believe that it's you. And that's one of the most insidious parts about being in a toxic environment, about this gaslighting behavior, is that eventually you begin to not even take credit for the things that you've done, for the strategies, for the projects that you have done, because you believe that it wasn't you, or that it couldn't be you, or that you don't have the right to take credit for the work that you have done. So first you have to recognize your value, and that's what I said, it starts with building your mindset, and it starts with the habit of building your mindset so that you can even begin to recognize and take ownership of the work that you are doing. And by ownership, I mean taking credit for, so that you're not just taking accountability for the things that don't go well, because that's the other part that happens. There's a greater sense on accountability for things that don't go well and a lesser accountability on the things that have gone well. I want you to take credit for everything equally. And in fact, minimize the things that don't go well and focus on the things that do. Because we see our colleagues doing that, we need to take advantage of that as well. Focus and take full credit of the things that you have done. We talked about it last week where I talked about the one word that will kill your career, we. There is definitely, if you haven't, go listen to episode 26. There are ways to recognize that you are part of a team while still honoring your leadership, while still honoring your specific contributions that honor your intellectual property, your intellectual potential. So, as you are building this habit by writing down, and if it's not the Career Accelerator Planner, still write somewhere. We make it easier for you by providing you with the prompts and the questions that will help to move you quicker, to accelerate you towards knowing what to document. But if that's not for you, find somewhere to document your contributions, your performance, so that you begin to know your value. Because when you eventually leave the organization, this organization that is toxic, I want you to leave knowing what you contributed to the bottom line. You'll remember the incredible ideas and strategies that you have, what you implemented or even suggested, because yes, you take credit for your ideas as well, because they show the way that you think, even if they weren't implemented. And you'll have proof, not just in your planner, but in your mind. You'll have that belief. You'll be anchored in your belief that you brought value every single day, and no one can take that away from you. I wish I had a system like the Career Accelerator Planner. And that's me speaking from my heart. I wish that I had, because what I had was disjointed everywhere. And when you are consistently gaslit, manipulated, you forget and you don't document in the way that you should. So everything was so disjointed in my mind that I had to and go through all of my notebooks, all of my journals, and pull out the information. And who knows? Maybe I wouldn't have needed to have detoxed a 20-year career in 7 months and processed it and everything else. Or maybe the time would have been much less. But I know now just how incredibly good I was. That's long and short of it, you know? Um, and I want that for everyone else. It's not just enough for me to now recognize it, having taken that step back. I want you to recognize it right now where you are. And so I will leave you with this. You are incredible. You are a force. You are infinitely creative. You are intelligent. Your work matters. You embody value. You matter. Take a deep breath, and I'll say it again. You are a force. You are infinitely creative. You are incredibly intelligent. You and your work matter. You embody value. You alone matter. And I never want you to feel or be in the position where you can't talk about the behaviors that you are feeling. You are not too sensitive. That is a common one. You are not imagining things. What you are feeling is valid. And yes, there are several other steps outside of what we've talked about, but the first step to regaining your voice, regaining your power, is by shifting your mindset and taking back what has been taken from you. So take back your credit, take back your work so that you are anchored in your value, because you matter. You absolutely matter. That is it for episode 27. I don't know if there's a smooth way to end this conversation, but there you go. That is it for episode 27. And it is a lot because of the way we are made to feel about these conversations. But I want to give you the power back. And now I want you to share this episode with as many people as possible so that you can help them empower themselves and encourage themselves, and to know that they are not alone. I want you to spread the word as much as possible so that more people know how to identify the behavior, more importantly, how to regain their voice. If you are wondering how we can work together, I invite you to check out my website, leadershipuntitledinstitute.com, so that you can learn more about my services. This has been an incredible conversation, and I thank you for being here. And I'm going to end off again with the reminder that you are a force. You are incredibly creative, infinitely intelligent. Your work matters. You embody value. You matter. And I will see you here next week for episode 28.